hiring excellence, I think, needs to be us really educating the organization on why workforce planning needs to be there, capacity planning, the right tools, the right processes, recruiter enablement, rec ops programs, that we aren't just filling jobs anymore. We really are a function that can impact the bottom line of an organization and help impact revenue.
Welcome to Offer Accepted, the podcast that elevates your recruiting game. Your host, Shannon Ogborn, interviews top talent acquisition leaders, uncovering their secrets to building and leading successful recruiting teams. Gain valuable insights and actionable advice from analyzing cutting-edge metrics to claiming your seat at the table. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Offer Accepted. I'm Shannon Ogborn, your host, and this episode is brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform empowering ambitious teams from seed to IPO and beyond. I'm super excited today because I am here with Natalie Stones, founder of Talent Collective and Talent Refinery. Natalie comes to Offer Accepted with over 20 years of experience in the recruiting space, spanning both agency and in-house recruiting leadership. We are just so lucky to get to learn from her today. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
I would love if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background, and mostly a little bit about what you're doing at Talent Collective and Talent Refinery.
Sure. Yes. So life is busy over here, even though recruiting is kind of in a slow phase these days. We are definitely busy over here. And the things that keep us going are, number one is Talent Collective, which I'm co-founder of. It is a community for women or those who identify as a woman in talent acquisition. It's a global community. At this point, we're at almost 250 members, global TA leaders, agency owners, IC recruiters, rec ops specialists, et cetera. And it's a great community. We do a lot of professional development, networking, et cetera, lots of events. So that is half of my life. The other half is Talent Refinery, which is a fractional recruiting firm. And what I mean by that is we operate as interim TA leaders. So we go in on an interim basis and help either audit their recruiting infrastructures, help build it, or set it for scale. And we can help in terms of strategy, managing people, processes, programs, and we do it all fractionally.
Amazing. And I know that there's a big rise in this recently, so that's great that you all are filling such a big gap in the market. But I'm curious because you've had all this experience in-house, agency, and now on the fractional side, and the challenges of recruiting are constantly evolving. But what have you noticed to be one of the most standout challenges more recently for recruiting at large TA teams?
Well, the inevitable is naturally the economy right now, and companies honestly kind of jumping to downsize and in some cases mitigate their recruiting teams. But there are still recruiting needs and functions that have to go on. And I think that companies are still in this rock and hard place trying to determine, okay, well, we don't really have a lot of searches and open recs, so we probably don't need recruiters. But what about all the things that the recruiting team had already built? And or you may have attrition and recs that you need backfilled. So how do you think about fulfilling that recruiting function, but not on a full-time basis? And so what we love and what we are really passionate about is filling in those gaps and really helping companies understand that you don't always need a full-time, especially in this market. You don't necessarily need a full-time permanent employee, whether that's a head of talent at a very large, lofty salary or a full-time recruiter that may not have a whole lot to work on. And so, for example, with our model, what we teach our clients is you can help, or we can help you scale up and down and work on things as you need it. For example, some of our clients right now, we're working on 2 recs, and at the same time, I'm doing an audit. Other clients, it's things are steady and they always kind of need us, so we're in maintenance mode. There are others where we're just working on a project. They want us to kind of audit their ATS system, put together reporting, dashboards, teach their hiring managers how to really leverage the system. And when that's done, we're done. And they'll call us next month, a couple months later when they actually need more projects. So my point is, the beauty of this is, don't let your recruiting function go by the wayside just because you don't have a lot of hiring going on. There's a lot of projects and process improvement that can be handled by a fractional recruiter or a fractional head of talent.
Plus, frankly, you never really know when things are going to ramp back up, when the market's going to ramp back up,
Mhm.
when your company is going to fundraise, and all of these things that create a lot of pressure downstream, uh, like in an instant, that if you don't have any plan in place, you're just kind of left floundering, which is obviously not where you want to
Yes.
be if you're trying to get things moving quickly.
That is a phenomenal point, actually, that I want to clarify, that this isn't just something, fractional isn't just helpful in a down economy. It is helpful at all stages of the economy. And where it's most helpful is those situations, especially, VC funded startups. You don't know when you're going to get that next round of funding, or maybe you're getting ready for a product launch and you need some recruiting help just for the needs of that. And when that's done and you scale down, or there's a big initiative that you want to roll out. It's unrelated to the economy. We just happen to see a lot more fractional popping up right now because of the stage we're in, but the state that we're in. But really, fractional is so helpful depending on the size, the stage, or a unique need that your business has at that time or in that season.
Exactly. And I know that you've touched on a couple of these things, but can you tell me a little bit more about why companies should consider hiring fractional TA folks, or what are the benefits that people may not be as acutely aware of?
Really, the benefit is, and this is so cliched to say, but you can hire expert talent at a fraction of the cost. And it is so cliche to say that because it's the best word. It literally is a fraction. For example, you could hire, in our case, I'm embedded in as a fractional head of talent and I work 10 hours a week for three different clients. Another client we're going to be embedding in for 30 hours a week. And so we're almost like fully embedded until we get some of these things audited and launched, and then we're going to peel back. And so really the benefit is scaling up when you need it and being able to have the flexibility to scale down when you don't need it. And all of that is tied to time and expense and resources. So, what would a world look like in your company if you didn't always need to carry the overhead of a full time individual on salary, on benefits, equity? Like, I don't get any equity with any of my clients. I could arrange that, depending on the situation, but they're not promising me full time employment. They're not providing my benefits. In my current cases, they're not paying me equity, but they're paying me for the value and the quality of work that, or excuse me, my expertise that they need right now in this state. So, as a recap, the real benefits are the financial flexibility, the ability to flex up and down when you're scaling, and you're able to tap in to expert talent when you need it without having to go out and hire that person full time.
Or lay
I
the
think
person
back to
off?
some, yeah, yeah, and that is a perfect example. Is my A couple of roles back, I was head of talent, and one of them I went in and I was kind of like fixing the department, rebuilding, the stakeholder relationships, transitioning people out, et cetera, et cetera. But once I got it back to a good place, I was kind of like, well, what do I do now? Right? Like, things are functioning and hiring is kind of in a steady state, but we don't plan to scale. And so I felt really bad about being on board with this really healthy full time salary. And at the same time, I was bored. And so I felt like, well, I kind of want to move on. But as a recruiter, I know that's not good. I don't want to be a job hopper. And so that, in a case like that, that's where fractional really would have been beneficial for me and the company. Another
Yeah.
situation, it was a recently funded Series B startup. They had no recruiting function. I came in, built it, set it for scale, and we got it scaled, doubled in size. And then it's kind of like, you're twiddling your fingers again because we got it to the place that we needed it. And I felt that my value that I could provide was no longer really needed. So maybe I was shooting myself in the foot by feeling like, oh, I'm just kind of sitting here. I'm getting a good salary and I don't have to do a whole lot of things. That's not in values alignment for me. But I think back to those things. And that's why I'm so passionate about fractional now is it really is in the best interest of the company. And it allows the fractional professional the ability to continue to amplify their skills, diversify their portfolio of clients. I feel like I'm learning so much faster because I'm working with different companies at they have different needs, right? And frankly, I'm diversifying my income. So if I lose one client, that's okay, right? I have a couple others that financially I will be okay with versus being laid off. I was laid off 2 times in the past 3 years. And like that is a big burden on a family and household. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
So I'm curious what the difference is between paying someone fractionally and paying a contingency fee for an agency, because there's companies I think that don't understand the difference, or they may be deciding between the two, and there's different situations where one works for a company right now. But can you expand a little bit on what the differences are and what the benefit may be?
Mhm. So, contingent is typically a staffing or recruiting agency that is essentially working for free on a search with the hopes that the candidates that they present to this company for this role will get picked. And if so, they will then charge 25 to 30% of that candidate's annual salary as their fee for their work. But essentially, the bottom line is they're working for free with the hope that they'll fill it and make, some money. I did that for half of my career and I just don't do that anymore. I feel like I provide value and I have a lot to offer. And so our model, which is very common in fractional, is charging a retainer. Typically, it's a monthly retainer. It's paid up front, and we're paid for our time. We're not paid on the success of filling a role. The other thing is, for example, some of these clients, I'm working 10 hours a week, so 40 hours a month on a retainer, but we're running a couple searches plus doing a bunch of other projects and programs. So whatever you can fill in that time, that you're paying for the time. So the benefit really is, for example, we could charge a monthly retainer of 10K, but build out your dashboards, audit a certain program, vet some vendors. We're operating like your full-time recruiting team and also doing full cycle for that price versus send out that one rec to an agency and get charged 30%. If it's a 100K candidate, you're paying a 30K fee. So right there, you get a lot more for your money in a fractional arrangement and you get the flexibility to scale up and scale down. So that's really where the benefit is and the difference. And fractional is somewhat of a newer, nuanced term. So there are a lot of companies that, I'll reach out to or have conversations with, and they'll say, oh, we're actually not looking to work with staffing agencies right now or consultant. That's not what fractional is. Fractional is meant to be seen as an embedded team member within your organization, just as if they were on payroll full time. There's no difference. We are coming in as a team member and doing all the things that you would have given a full-time team member. So a fractional arrangement is not a staffing agency contingent arrangement.
Yeah, and we'll get to this in a little bit about, like you're saying, the embedded nature of fractional versus consulting, which that's very interesting, the differences there. But I'm curious because,
Mhm.
like, how do you know when fractional is better over permanent or can, you know, or contingency? Because sometimes contingency, if you have like a super niche search and things like that, and someone has a big network, that could be a use case where that makes sense. But how do you know when fractional is the better situation over hiring a recruiter permanently or going to an agency to fill
Mhm.
a particular role?
That's a really great call out because there is a time and place for all of them, right? If you're a Coca-Cola, you need full-time employees, and you're not going to be able to be effective with a bunch of fractionals in every single role. A fractional is meant to be an embedded interim solution. Now, interim can mean interim ongoing part-time because your business plans and objectives need that person for, say, like a year, 2 years ongoing and embedded. And so the difference there is you're able to leverage what seemingly would have been a full-time strategic expert in a role, but there may not be enough work yet for it to be justified to be a full-time position. So you need them interim, ongoing, part-time. A consultant would be, okay, we have this pain point, we need to have a solution for it, and it's more on a project basis where we kind of know a start and an end time for this project need, but there really isn't an ongoing
Right, like
relationship.
it's an objective to achieve
And
right now.
yes, yes. And then to your point, yes, an agency has a time and place as well. If it is a very niche, hard to fill search, that fractional team has exhausted their network or having a really hard time finding the right candidate, a fractional team can still call out that rec to an agency who is niche and has that pool of talent.
So, one of the struggles that I feel like is going to be, I mean, I'm just going to forecast a predicament of 2024, which is okay, we know that we need fractional
Mhm.
folks, but how do you integrate people into your team seamlessly so that you're getting the most out of this situation? So, when you think tactically about how a company should go about embedding fractional TA people into their team, what are the steps to do that?
So you would need to really, number one, scope out the need and really have a deep dive kind of kickoff conversation. What really are the objectives of this role? Why do you need this role? Do you need it ongoing because you need the strategic leadership to manage the team? Is it that you have a bunch of hiring plans and so you're trying to fill your capacity plan with some fractional talent? So essentially, what is the scope of work and make sure everybody's on the same page and really mapping out the longevity of the engagement so that everybody is on the same page about the timeline and expectations. That again, this isn't a consultant project, but we would like to have you on board for the next 6 months to a year to fill XYZ objectives. And you have that all mapped out in, an SLA or a statement of work. And then you're very clear on like what the payment arrangements are, because as a fractional we operate our own businesses and we invoice, we're 1099 and we invoice, so making sure everybody's on the same page about that. And or do you want to bring them embedded as a fractional W2? Like there are two different ways to do it. Then integrate them into your team and onboard them just the same as you would a full-time person. There really is no like magic playbook for this, because really the point that I'm trying to stress is a fractional should not be seen any different than a full-time hire. You just are paying for a fraction of the person's time, I should say. So whatever your onboarding plan would have been for your head of talent or your recruiter, it should be no different. They should go through all the training. They should go to the introductory meetings. They should be ramped up just the same. Access should be the same. And their ongoing training and development and what you offer should be the same. Now, by offer, I mean like in terms of, the ongoing training and development. Are you going to invite them to, the quarterly meetups or company retreats or whatever? They should be seen and treated the same as if they were a permanent employee.
And that's different than
But they know
consulting.
we're here.
And that's different than consulting because
Yes.
consulting is like you have a certain level of access, you work sort of minimally with people internally, it's kind of like a need to know or need to do basis, and you're not integrated into the culture in that way. And I think I actually feel like I had a little bit of misconception about how fractional folks operated different than consulting. And so this is very informative for me even to hear more about the differences in what should be expected of a company and the person when thinking about
Mhm.
fractional work?
I can give you some good examples. So I think it's harder for companies to wrap their mind around fractional recruiting right now because it is somewhat newer and kind of unclear. But when you look back historically, fractional CFOs, fractional general counsel, fractional CMOs, it's very common. They are not treated any different than if you had a permanent CFO, a permanent general counsel, or a permanent CMO. They have all the right access. They are expected to be that strategic leader running those departments. And again, fractional doesn't always have to be at the leadership level. It can also be at the IC level. But that's the point I'm trying to make is in those other disciplines, they are expected to deliver as if they were just like a full-time employee. There just isn't maybe enough work needed to justify it being a full-time role. So why would the onboarding, the immersion into the culture, the expectations of the role be any different other than the time commitment, right? So that is kind of the comparative I always try to make when people are kind of unclear how to fractionalize recruiting. It should be no different than you were hiring a head of talent or your go to market recruiter, your tech recruiter, so be it.
What are some of the, and you named a couple, but what are some of the activities that a company can do to help integrate folks in or make the situation clear amongst others? Because I think there is probably a situation where a company brings someone in, they're like, "Oh, you're a consultant or you're contingency or you're not here to stay," and the employees don't understand how this person fits in. How would
Mhm.
you explain that to your organization?
It might just mean that you don't have to push the word fractional all the time, right? It's at the, company all hands on Monday, it's I'd like to introduce you to our new head of talent. Does it really matter to present and introduce that person as this is our new fractional head of talent, right? Like, does that really matter? Will the company really understand that? Do they need to understand that? It's this is your go-to person for talent. This is your strategic talent leader. This is your go-to person for your go-to-market recruiting, et cetera, et cetera. So in some cases, it might just mean like not pushing so much the narrative of fractional. It's just an arrangement. It's the way that the engagement is set up. It's less about what the person is doing and bringing to the company.
Definitely. I mean, I've worked at companies where folks were on 1099 on what I guess is kind of a
Mhm.
contract, but even then, it's like they still were in the culture, they were still doing the same work, they were still a part of the team, and so, yeah, sometimes, less explanation may actually be better so that people aren't confusing the situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you do want to, try to help educate the company that this is our fractional head of talent. And what that means is they are our go to strategic leader for recruiting, but they will be working with us on a part time, ongoing basis. So you can expect for them to be, working with us 10 hours a week, whatever. So you may, have a different arrangement and when you can access them, et cetera, et cetera. So it could also just be educating the organization as well. But sometimes, the word fractional could just be more confusing. So why not just focus on the person, the value that they bring, and the expectation of the role that they're contributing to the organization?
100%. One sort of last, like, logistical follow-up question I have on this is when a fractional person is thinking about how they spend their time or setting those boundaries and the company is thinking like, okay, when do we need this person to be on, what's the best way to come to an agreement on what the hours are? Because I know for me,
Mhm.
like, I kind of work odd hours and I don't do like tracking very well, things like that. But so it makes it hard to
Mhm.
set firm boundaries on the company side or the employee side. How do you see that coming together?
Well, what I have seen not work is when you tell a company, I will be available to you on Monday, Wednesday, Friday only. Well, what if things come up on Tuesday and Thursday? So, really, like segmenting yourself out in terms of not being available on certain days, I don't think is doing the company justice. So the way that I set it up with our clients is we're always available, but we're on the back end kind of tracking our billable hours, so to speak. We're not billing them for billable hours because they're on retainer, but we're keeping track of our time and we know how much time we're putting in. But we're available to the company and the leaders for as much time as the engagement allowed for. And so we don't want to limit ourselves that we're only working from 9 to 12 every single day or only Tuesday, Thursdays. It's we want to be seen as a embedded team member. So we should be offering the same in terms of access, availability, and contribution.
Very interesting. Very counterintuitive to what I would have thought. I'm learning so much today.
Yeah, and there's no perfect science to it yet, but and some fractionals do it differently, but I think the most important thing to take away is really the benefit to organizations. Like, you're saving so much money. Like, please listen. You're saving so much money. You can tap into this level of expertise as you need it, when you need it, how much you need it, and you don't always have to think of the permanent full-time lens until there is a time for that. Um, and yeah, just give it an opportunity because it could help continue to move that function within your organization without having to strip it completely.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely a concept that, as you have mentioned previously, has existed for a while, but it's making its way into recruiting, I think, a little bit forced
Yeah.
forced by the market conditions. But I am glad to see
Yes.
people and individual recruiters who and talent leaders who are going out to do their own thing, value their time, because honestly, if you're in talent and it's a really down time and you're sitting there for 30 hours a week wondering what to do with yourself, like, that's actually not a job that a lot of people want to be in a lot of seasons of life.
And we've seen so many recruiters shift to this fractional model because one, they're so desperate to like grab work and all they're seeing available is not a whole lot available. And the roles that are available, there's so much competition. And so I have a lot of coaching calls with recruiters that want to figure out how to spin this up, make themselves available and marketable, but that don't want to start an agency and work contingent and work for free. Like, they want to be paid for their time and their value and contribution. And so I also love having conversations with recruiters that are curious about this. So I think you'll start to see a shift more because the the recruiters as professionals are starting to move more in this direction. And so what will become more available to companies will be these sorts of arrangements.
Definitely. Yeah, I for one am excited to see the growth in this area because I think the some of the best things that I have seen doing this podcast and talking to a lot of talent folks is people who have taken concepts from other parts of business and applied them to recruiting, and they seem to be
Mhm.
really successful because there is a model out there for having applied it in a different capacity. So I think this is on the up and up, not even just for the short term like you said, but for the long
Mhm.
term as well, because outside of the macro environment,
Mhm.
there's a million different things that could be going on within a company that would require or have fractional TA folks as the primary way to go versus hiring a full-time person, contingency, and all the other things.
Yes, exactly. I love it. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to kind of push this narrative and help educate on fractional.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to take a step back and especially because you have so much experience in the recruiting space. Like, what does hiring excellence really mean to you?
Putting as a recruiter, putting yourself in a confident place to be able to have a strategic seat at the table and to no longer lead in a transactional state and reactionary state. So, hiring excellence, I think, needs to be us really educating the organization on why workforce planning needs to be there, capacity planning, the right tools, the right processes, recruiter enablement, rec ops programs, that we aren't just filling jobs anymore. We really are a function that can impact the bottom line of an organization and help impact revenue. We can be contributing to revenue if we are given an opportunity to strategically lead it in that way.
Yeah, I love that. I think the seat at the table is so important and it helps bring all the stakeholders together so that everyone is contributing to hiring excellence, not just the recruiting team.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that you have some thoughts and opinions on things that are ongoing and happening. So my favorite and last question for you is, what is your recruiting hot take?
Well, as I said earlier, I think there's a time and place for contingency, and I owe half of my career to contingency. But I adamantly feel that fractional is the future. And we obviously talked about the benefits for companies, but I think we will also start to see that a lot of agency recruiters start making the move to fractional because they see the benefit in being paid for their time and value upfront. And so I'm curious to see what the future holds for contingency recruiting.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm very curious to see too because I can sort of see it from both sides, why. And honestly, I know some agency recruiters who just make so much money. And I'm like, "Oh, well that would certainly
You
be
think?
nice, but the ebbs and flows are not for everybody." And I feel like fractional could be more beneficial in that way. So it's all pros and cons, it's all personal preference, but I do think that people will be thinking about it in the future.
Mhm. Absolutely. I hope so.
Great. Well, I think we are coming up on our time. So, where should people go to learn more about you and your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active there and I respond to my DMs daily. So that's the best place. Otherwise, you can email me at natalie@talentrefinery.co.
Amazing. Well, Natalie, we are so grateful to have you have joined us today. Like I said, I personally learned a lot and I think others will as well. So, thank you so much for joining us on Offer Accepted. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks for listening to Offer Accepted, the podcast for ambitious recruiting professionals, brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share with your TA community. We'll see you next time.